Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. You've noticed what we've noticed, right? In the last few days, it seems as though someone somewhere hit a button. All of a sudden, we are seeing conservatives, Republicans coming out to finally state the obvious. The COVID vaccines are saving lives, they are safe and effective, and they are a great way of protecting you, your family, and your loved ones from the scourge of COVID, an infectious respiratory virus which has already killed more than 600,000 Americans, and at various points brought our hospitals and our broader society to its knees.
Please take COVID seriously. I can't say it enough. Enough people have died. We don't need any more deaths.
America, we're in this together.
And if you can, get the vaccine.
For information on vaccine sites, visit the Vaccine Finder on the homepage of foxnews.com.
You do see about 95 to 98% of people in the hospital for COVID are people that aren't vaccinated. And I just, I was ready to get the vaccine. I've always felt it was safe and effective.
These shots need to get in everybody's arm as rapidly as possible, or we're going to be back in a situation in the fall that we don't yearn for, that we went through last year.
If you are vaccinated, fully vaccinated, the chance of you getting seriously ill or dying from COVID is effectively zero.
All of this is great and very welcome, but it is striking to see. Striking to see someone like Florida Governor Ron DeSantis getting up and saying, hey, guys, the vaccines will save your lives. It is bizarre because seeing it makes you realize just how completely absent Republicans have been for all this time. We, of course, have covered the anti-vax or anti-pro-vax just asking questions, juvenile trolling from Fox News, and the irresponsible, wildly insidious way they have covered the pandemic. But it is strange how much mainstream Republicans, the big mouthpieces for conservatism, have been essentially absent on the whole question altogether. I think that is because, from the beginning, huge parts of the Republican Party have seen the pandemic as fundamentally a political problem rather than a once-in-a-lifetime health crisis. Now, the person that set the tone for that was, of course, Donald Trump, and it flowed down. Because the most important thing to Donald Trump, who was the leader of the Republican Party and was president when the pandemic hit, was what the pandemic was doing to the stock market and therefore his re-election campaign. On Monday, March 9th, 2020, with the stock market expected to fall precipitously, remember, rather than do something that would actually improve the situation, Trump tried to bluff his way through, tweeting, quote, the fake news media and their partner, the Democrat Party, is doing everything within its semi-considerable power, used to be greater, to inflame the coronavirus situation far beyond what the facts would warrant. Surgeon General, the risk is low to the average American. The Dow fell 8% that day. 3 days later, on Thursday, it fell 10% for what was the worst day since the 1987 crash. And so on Friday, to rally the market, Trump paraded a bunch of CEOs around the Rose Garden in the afternoon, made a bunch of empty promises that Google has 1,700 engineers working on a website to facilitate COVID testing. They did not have 1,700 engineers working on that. And then when the Dow finished higher that day, after a terrible week, Trump signed the stock chart and gave it to his loyal supporter Lou Dobbs of Fox Business. That did nothing to stop COVID from spreading, right? Trump never actually cared about stopping COVID from spreading, about stopping people from getting sick. Just the week before that, he had openly admitted he did not want to let Americans infected with COVID off a cruise ship because, quote, I'd rather have them stay on. I don't need the numbers to double. Now, Trump is a special case, okay? He is a sociopath who I believe actually lacks the ability to actually appreciate human suffering and loss at a very deep level. Just actually can't do it. And because he treated the disease like a public relations issue, that did set the tone for the rest of the party. It wasn't just Trump. Here's a great example. Texas Senator Ted Cruz echoing the exact same cynicism exactly 1 year ago today.
If it ends up that Biden wins in November, I hope he doesn't. I don't think he will. But if he does, I guarantee you the week after the election, suddenly all those Democratic governors, all those Democratic mayors will say, everything's magically better. Go back to work, go back to school. Suddenly the problems are solved. You won't even have to wait for Biden to be sworn in. All they'll need is election day. And suddenly their willingness to just destroy people's lives and livelihoods, they will have accomplished their task. That's wrong. It's cynical. and we shouldn't be a part of it.
Okay, utterly, completely, in every possible conceivable way wrong. Just astoundingly, beautifully wrong, right? It was Republicans that rushed to open up sooner, even after Biden was elected. Democratic states, even with schools, right, more reticent. Just completely wrong. Ted Cruz, absolutely wrong. It's not how things shook out. But it's so revealing. Why did he make that mistake? Because Ted Cruz himself only views the pandemic through a political prism. And so he projects it onto everyone else. He thinks Democrats do too. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis consistently downplayed the health threats throughout this crisis, and he was applauded by Republicans for winning the pandemic. Just last week, he started selling a bunch of anti-COVID expertise merchandise, including lockdown koozies with a quote by him saying, "How the hell am I going to be able to drink a beer with a mask on?" And T-shirts that read, "Don't Fauci my Florida." That's all about political positioning. It was always about political positioning. And to be fair, there's been a lot of political posturing around the pandemic from Democrats and liberals as well. There has been. But the deep problem here is that there's always been this sense among Republicans and Republican politicians, not all of them, but the vast majority, that COVID is essentially an invented threat. The libs are more or less making this up. You just need to, manage it and move along and not freak out. Now, I do think there's a complex relationship between who's leading the pushback to, say, COVID measures, particularly vaccines, and who's following. But because of most of that, if you gave most Republican politicians truth serum, I think they would tell you that once the vaccines were available, the goal for Republicans was essentially to have their cake and eat it too. Meaning, let the Biden administration, which I think Republicans secretly know is certainly far more competent than the Trump administration, generally wants to solve the problem, let the Biden administration handle the crisis. Let them administer the vaccine across the country, but don't lift a finger to aid them. Take your pot shots where you can. Maybe also flirt with anti-pro-vax rhetoric like Tucker Carlson. And that way, you can have your cake and eat it too, right? You get your state vaccinated, you open up businesses, not submerge your hospitals, while also wiping your hands of the whole thing and maintaining a good standing with the base that is radicalized against public health measures in general. Okay? Now, we saw this. States from Tennessee to Missouri to even Florida, Ron DeSantis issued an executive order about COVID mandates, right? Now, the perfect example of the inherent contradictions of this are the Republicans who refuse to say if they are vaccinated. Tucker Carlson, for example, is using the same line to multiple reporters, comparing sharing his vaccination status to sharing his favorite sex positions. He's used that line multiple times. It's the kind of line that would maybe be clever from a 12-year-old. He's very proud of it. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene claimed that asking her status at a press conference the other day is a HIPAA violation. It's not. And wouldn't you expect her to be the first person to just tell you she's not vaccinated and be proud about it? But for some reason, she didn't want to answer. Neither did Tucker Carlson. I wonder what their vaccination status is. Today, Congressman Ronnie Jackson asked why Democrats don't get asked if they have been vaccinated. And the answer is because they have been, and they told everyone, because they want other people to get vaccinated. In fact, a bunch of reporters called up every member of Congress, and every Democratic member of Congress said, yeah, I got vaccinated. You should too, because they want people to not get killed from COVID. And I think what's happened here, as I try to make sense of what we're seeing the last few days, I do think that with all the propaganda and all the political posturing, a lot of Republicans convince themselves it really is not that big a deal, that they could just get away with a hands-off approach. But guess what? We keep relearning the same lesson over and over again, don't we, folks? It doesn't go anywhere. It's the same thing. It's out there. We may be done with COVID. COVID's not done with us. We've got a variant that is 60% more transmissible than the original virus, huge pools of unvaccinated people, and nearly all restrictions that were helping to keep the virus in check, right, on venues and businesses and social events, nightclubs, concerts, are gone. So what do you think all three of those things add up to? Well, you get an outbreak precisely like Dr. Peter Hotez said would happen.
remember at this time last year, we were looking pretty good. And then we had that enormous acceleration after the July 4th holiday. July, August, September was terrible in this part of the country. And we have to assume that Mother Nature is telling us that that same thing's going to happen again. So I'm really holding my breath and about the South is what happens over this summer.
Now, Dr. Hotez is not a politician. Just because he's an expert doesn't mean he's infallible, certainly, but he doesn't have a dog in the fight from a political standpoint. I mean, that's his best assessment. And here's Florida Governor Ron DeSantis on Fox News with Laura Ingraham laughing at him, talking about how liberals are just addicted to scaremongering. And here's where Florida cases are now. This is what the graph looks like. Look at that spike at the end. So thank you, Governor DeSantis, for telling people to get vaccinated. But we really could have used this much sooner. I'm glad you're doing it. Let's keep it up. Maybe instead of selling T-shirts and koozies, we can talk about how the vaccine has saved people's lives. And this is not about people with a certain political persuasion getting the virus or dying of it. I don't care. No one cares, really, I think. It's really not about politics. Everything is about politics at some level, but this shouldn't be, or it shouldn't be about politics in the way it has become. I hope this is a final moment to change that model of thinking among everyone alike, that this is fundamentally a political problem to solve, particularly the Republican Party that views it that way. Let's get everyone vaccinated. Let's save as many lives as possible. And then we could just fight about all the other stuff later. OK?